Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Rachel Mushawar, and I lead the America's Partner Sales Organization at AWS. And I'm thrilled to be accompanied by three of our amazing partners that are here with me today. And we're going to get their insights and realities of building work environments that prioritize inclusivity, diversity, and equity. We're going to dive deep into some really hard questions around what does it really mean to make an impact? How are they measuring success? And how are we holding ourselves accountable for creating the future that we all want? But we'll get into all of that in the next hour. I joined AWS this past February because I wanted to come and work for the largest cloud company in the world and in the partner ecosystem to help our customers leverage the innovative technology that AWS has to achieve the unimaginable. But another major reason I came here was because of the value that Amazon places on inclusion, on diversity and equity, which has personally been a passion point for me throughout my career. At Amazon, we believe that building a welcoming, inclusive culture is integral to people doing their best work and is essential to what we can achieve as a company. Fostering a diverse, inclusive, and employee-obsessed culture is critical to connect, to inspire, and to grow our people, our partners, and the world as a whole. And frankly, it's something that we're very focused on here. Our most senior executives are in the trenches, helping clear roadblocks to make progress possible. We've got task force and affinity groups that employees can join to help drive the change. And every single Amazonian has the agency and the responsibility to make ID&E a core part of their everyday work. As a senior leader here at AWS, I am laser focused on prioritizing this work internally, making sure our teams feel safe, represented, valued, and empowered. But I'm also focused on prioritizing this externally and extending this ethos to our partners and our customers, giving them the tools and resources to make meaningful change. I am deeply committed to allyship, to mentorship, and to advocacy for those who are underrepresented. This also means that we all have to be vocal about where change needs to occur and calling out inherent biases that still disrupt practices that aren't inclusive. Because the truth is, we don't get it right all the time, and we still have a lot of work to do. So let's dive in. I'm going to turn it over to our panelists now and have them tell you a little bit about their roles. And I'd also love them to answer one pop question. As you're introducing yourself, could you please share with the audience who are you going on vacation with based on the last Amazon Prime show that you watched? Let's start with you, Andy.
Oh, that's a good one. Rachel, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm absolutely excited to be a part of this. It's such an important topic. Hi, everyone. My name is Andy Tay. I'm a senior managing director with Accenture. And my day job essentially is to lead our Accenture AWS business group, the partnership between Accenture and AWS. In that capacity, I lead a set of diverse teams right across the world. in terms of the sort of the question, Rachel, you asked, been racking my brain. I'd have to say Cormoran Strike. I'm a Brit in the US, and so I make a big thing about trying to stay connected with the UK, and I on Prime Video have been able to do that with CB Strike. For those of you who've seen that, and so I kind of like Cormoran Strike. He's this sort of a war veteran who's come back to London, and he's turned himself into a private investigator, and he's got some fantastic cases. It'd be great to spend some time with him on vacation and learn all about some of those cases.
Wow, that sounds like it'd be a vacation full of work and full of a lot of homework, Andy. Let's turn it over to Lauren and have her introduce herself and find out where she's going on vacation.
Hey, Rachel, thank you again for inviting me to participate today. And what a great panel and timely topic. My name is Lauren Shanley. I am the go-to-market business manager and chief of staff at Pegasystems. And what that encompasses is, just like Andy, several teams across the globe, starting with the sales teams in our 3 regions, including the strategy team, the marketing team, the consulting team, and the partner team, which includes wonderful partners like Rachel and AWS. So certainly deal with a lot of different issues day to day, including IND, which is a topic that we've really centered on over the last 18 months of our Pega tenure. So I am going on vacation. I am obsessed with the show Fleabag. I was so disappointed there were only 2 seasons of it. So without giving spoiler alerts, Fleabag isn't necessarily the person that I'd want to go on vacation with, but her sister Claire does pretty well for herself. So I'm thinking she'll get me over to the Maldives with her high-paying job. So that's absolutely who I would choose. But back over to you, Rachel.
That's fabulous. Thank you so much, Lauren. All right, Val, why don't you close us out and share which Amazon Prime actor or actress you are going on vacation with?
Absolutely. Rachel, thank you so much. As everybody has said, I'm extremely grateful to be here today and be talking about this topic. I think it's important, but just incredible how Amazon has built a track this year at reInvent that's specific to ID&E. It's amazing. So Valerie Henderson, I am the Chief Revenue Officer at Calent. We are 100% AWS focused consulting partner. My day-to-day is really all things revenue, driving revenue, revenue operations, working cross-functionally with marketing, alliance, delivery. It's an incredible job that I feel grateful to have. Now, vacation is something I'm very passionate about. So the person I would want to go on vacation with is probably going to be Mrs. Maisel from The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. I am a lover of comedy, stand-up of all kinds, and I think laughter is the great equalizer, and I would love to go on vacation with her and laugh at all of the absurdities that we would see and experience. So that's who I'm going to pick.
That is fabulous. Well, to be inclusive, I will share the last Amazon Prime show that I watched. I watched a top-notch documentary, Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. So that's who I would be going on vacation with.
Wow.
So let's jump right in and talk about ID&E. And ID&E is very frequently part of an HR initiative. But Andy, I'd love to hear from you on how do you make ID&E a true part of a company's culture? I mean, it seems like everyone is talking about ID&E now, which is great. But how do we get beyond talking about it and actually make it part of our everyday work so we don't hear things like, oh, she's the first female vice president, so on and so forth. Tell me what you think about really integrating this into a company's culture and moving beyond talking.
Rachel, thanks for that. It's a really good question. And I'd probably start by saying it's good to talk. I find that serves almost as a sort of level playing ground, and gets people sort of comfortable with the topic. But as you rightly say, it's super important that we move very intentionally beyond the talk and to sort of bake it into our everyday business, in how our organizations work and the purpose for which they work. Within Accenture, we probably, I'd say, I'd touch on three core areas, in terms of trying to get that into our everyday work, where it's not a separate thing, but it's part of our DNA. Firstly, we sort of have an ambition to be the world's most diverse and inclusive company. And with that, we've been setting bold goals. We've been making those transparent since 2016, boldly stating what they are and measuring them. And then the second thing is really setting a sort of commitment to equality and sort of that sort of culture of equality that starts at our CEO, our board, and also our global management committee. With sort of that focus of transparent, bold goals and also having this commitment to culture, we feel that you build the trust and people get to sort of feel comfortable in being themselves. But we also find that a lot of it comes down to the leaders every single day on the ground who are leading teams. And we sort of push our leaders and we encourage them to build and to sustain this sort of environment of equality and inclusivity. Now, one thing I do want to touch on is this concept of culture makers. We find that leaders can sort of give it a go and try, but you always find leaders who are ahead of the curve. Those ones who sort of say more, do more, and they sort of really push the boundaries and clear the obstacles. And so we pay very close focus and intentionality on getting those sort of culture makers to lead. And we find that when you get those people to lead, the organizations actually grow twice as fast. And so those are the three areas, Rachel, that we find helps us live and breathe ID&E every single day in everything we do versus it being a separate initiative.
Great. Hey, Lauren, you and I connected many moons ago around our passion for ID&E and really jumping off of what Andy talked about around the culture makers. I'd love to hear from you. What are some of the most effective ways that you or other executives have led by example when it comes to modeling a focus on ID&E and really being those culture makers?
Absolutely. Well, yes, we certainly, have had our opportunities over the past few years really to center around women in tech and bringing more women to the table. So I think the biggest change I've seen over the last few years is really that diversity isn't just about gender. We are now looking at diversity as race, as where you are from, as where you identify, and also, disability is another part that is really being included into this ID&E initiative. So a lot of what we're doing at Pega was taking a look at ourselves. We certainly had a lot of just typical older, more tenured white men as our leadership, and we outsourced it to our people and heard from them what I&D means from them. We started 4 different work streams. And what we had them do is source those ideas really at the grassroots level and then get to a forum where we could bring in HR and bring in executives and say, here are our ideas. And one of the really incredible ideas that we had come out of that was what we're calling DIG days. So development, inclusion, and growth. And what those days are is every employee within our organization is able to take a full day, no meetings, no emails, and just focus on where they want to develop themselves and where they want to be better about inclusiveness. And it has been a fantastic thing to pilot because we're now starting to see the readout from that and hear what people want to focus on and hear where they want to really drive more diversity and inclusion. from every single employee all the way up to our president. So that's been a really good area. And I think where I'm starting to see myself personally as a leader is basically eliminating what I've heard called the secret or the silent handshake. Gabrielle Union talks about this in her most recent book, and I thought it was a great analogy for what we do, which is sometimes we don't want to speak up because it is very awkward. A great example is I was at a dinner a few weeks ago and somebody brought up paternity leave. Now, I don't have kids, I'm not married, so paternity leave doesn't really affect me. But the conversation centered around how incredible it was, and pros and cons to fathers getting more paternity leave. And I finally spoke up instead of just staying silent and saying it doesn't affect me. Why would I stand up for paternity leave? I said paternity leave isn't just about fathers bonding with their children. It's also about allowing moms to have a break. As we all certainly know, moms do need a break after giving birth and going through that. And so it's helping women in the workplace. So it's not just about fathers. It's not just about dads. It's truly also helping moms and having women back in the workplace and have that transition back to the workplace be something that feels supported. And so that secret handshake, I think in the past, I would have just stayed silent, and by staying silent, agreed with the fact that paternity leave now being months long is not something that people are used to. And instead, I took the focus in saying, you know what, I am going to stand up for this, even though it doesn't personally affect me. So I think a few things there, right? One, you have to hear from your employees how they want to develop themselves and then source those ideas. And then two, really challenge yourself to say, even though this doesn't personally affect me, how can I be an advocate for others? Whether that's how they identify in race, how they identify in gender, or even like in my example, just working parents. So it's a constant journey. I don't want to, laud myself too much and pat myself on the back too much for it, because I certainly still have a long way to go. I need to use my own dig days to develop myself, but certainly a start for a much longer and broader conversation, Rachel.
Fabulous. Val, I'd love to hear from you around what does progress look like to you and to Kaylin, and how are you all measuring it when it comes to ID&E?
Yeah, thank you so much. So obviously being an officer of revenue, I'm extremely passionate about measuring what matters. I apply KPIs to almost anything and everything we do. Often, if there are things that are happening that I can't relate back to a KPI, then I wonder why we're doing them. And I think for me, and a huge part of why I came to Caylent was the opportunity to introduce measures and accountability within ID&E. I've had the opportunity to work at large organizations, and this is my first opportunity to work for an organization that's still sub 200 employees. And we're in a position, me, myself, and the rest of the C-suite, to really define how we want to measure success. And I am thrilled that I have a CEO that has encouraged me to say, this is what I want. This is how I want to look at measurements for selection, for recruitment, for hiring, for promotion, for not only our own internal inclusion and diversity and equity, but customers as well. And for me, it was really important to also start at that foundation layer, right? How are we looking at recruiting in the underrepresented areas? And so actually assigning a metric. And that's one thing that I think is so amazing about AWS, that is data obsessed. And just the track for ID&E at reInvent, there's metrics about how you all are going to measure success for who attends what sessions. And I think that's amazing. And all of us need to apply that in every day if we want it to be considered important and not just a side project, which in a lot of organizations it still is. It has to be measured in the same way I'm held accountable to a revenue number. So right now we're working through our 2022 planning process, and we're actually assigning metrics to the funnel of those that we're recruiting within our engineering and in our sales and marketing, and we're going to hold ourselves accountable. I also think one really important thing is education and making sure that we are educating our employees on what this means, why we're doing it, And in my past, I've had the absolute pleasure to go through, bias training and other training about when we're interviewing and hiring, and also performance reviews, which is an area that we want to make sure that we're tracking and we're looking at month over month, year over year.
Fabulous. So Andy, building on that, how do you know that you're making an impact within your organization in regards to ID&E? Accenture is quite a bit bigger than 200 employees. How do you measure what you're doing?
Yeah, we're up to, I think it's 625,000 people now globally, and I think for me, Rachel, I tend to measure myself perhaps in 2 or 3 different ways. The first way is, we, as I touched on earlier, in 2016 became the first sort of professional services organization to make very transparent, and we published our workforce composition. And as we touched on earlier, not just from a gender perspective, but all forms of diversity. And we set targets. And last year, back in, I think it was September, we revised those targets to be a little bit more aggressive and forward-footing for Black and Hispanic and Latinx at all levels of the organization. So the first thing I do is to look at how am I personally impacting those bold, stated, transparent goals that are out there for everybody to see. How am I attracting? How am I developing talent? How am I progressing that talent through the organization? How am I, as I sort of work with teams, opening up opportunities, and not just different opportunities, but making sure we've got differences in terms of people coming into those opportunities, that we're exposing to those opportunities, and personally just holding myself accountable, and accountability is a massive part to this, holding myself accountable for having an impact to those public goals. And then the second thing is really to look at the impact I'm having in the community around us. We as an organization work with companies that are working hard to close and address the diversity issue, ID&E issue. Companies like Code.org or Girls Who Code, and I'm keen, therefore, personally to be involved with those companies and just make sure that Accenture is forward-footing with them as we work together to address this. So it's probably those 2 ways, and I'd probably say the third way is network. I think oftentimes have this sort of network or proximity bias in terms of, and a lot of it's natural. We don't know we're doing it, but you sort of work with the people closest to you. So I very intentionally try and push myself to go beyond that group and to make that group wider, such that I'm more inclusive and I have a sort of broader, diverse group that I work with on a daily basis. But a lot of it is self-inspection, and it takes work, but we have to do that.
So Lauren, you and I have had conversations about how hard it is around being a female in tech at a really high level. And we've talked about how a lot of these panels, the questions and the answers just make it sound super easy and, rainbows and unicorns. So I'd like to ask you a really hard question. Tell the audience about any times that you've experienced any resistance or impacts to improve diversity and inclusion. I'd love for our audience just to hear some raw truths around where we're at today and where we're headed.
Absolutely. And you're right. It's not an easy question to talk about, but it's an important one. And I will start off by saying, in my own journey around how I'm a more inclusive person and a more diverse person, I found that a study found 80% of us believe that we're less biased than the next person. So how does that work out? If everyone's better than average, where's the average? And so I think it's about taking a look at that and saying, okay, maybe I do need to look at my own behaviors and my own actions. At a previous employer I was at, this is back almost a decade ago, so things have certainly changed for the better since then. But I was part of a grassroots movement to get a Women at this company basically a grassroots organization started up so that we could start to have the conversations around, when you do take maternity leave, how do you come back? Or how do you work and network to get a coach in an organization who can help you, navigate your path through an organization, especially a large one, and start some of those conversations. And we did this for about 18 months without any real support from the top. It was, me sending Outlook invites or, somebody on the leadership team that we had voted for sending emails to distribution lists that were cobbled together. And so I made the real push to our president at the time to say, hey, let's work this in and have it be something formal at our sales kickoff. Let's have a formalized breakfast. We've been doing this grassroots for 18 months. We have had so many people attend. I think there's a lot of interest in this. And the answer was no. And the answer was that it was too busy. It was too late. And again, this is a conversation in October. Our sales kickoff was in January. It's never too late. So you know what we did, Rachel? We just pushed ahead and we continued to do it grassroots wise. And we doubled down on our efforts to get as many people as we can. And when 300 women show up, women and men, I should say, men did show up as well. When 300 women and men show up at a 7 a.m. breakfast, that was important. And so getting the groundswell behind it and them and leadership seeing, oh, wow, people are willing to get up at 7 a.m. and the conference is out in Vegas. So that there's some late nights. So people were still willing to get up at 7 a.m. for a non-formalized, really supported a breakfast. And that was able to really turn the tides and say, okay, how do we put some more formal structure behind this? How do we start to have this be a part of something that we offer our company as part of a formal agenda? So that was a huge accomplishment. So obviously disheartened, but pushed through, got that general population support and were able to formalize it. And I know that the company I worked for previously now does it across several different diversity groups, not just women. So I'm proud to be an alumni of that company and proud to see that we formalize it at Pega here today. And continuously found new, what we call employee resource groups. So we have veterans group. I know we just celebrated Veterans Day. And took the holiday off to honor them and had everybody do a mile walk at noon to follow the sun. That's a big Veterans Day push. We have a disabilities group. We have a Black at Pega. We have a Latino X at Pega. It has been fantastic to see really over the last decade of my career that that resistance to having something be formalized start to be removed because there is such a desire and need for it. So a little bit of a tough question, Rachel, but a promising answer for a better future for all of us.
Val, it is such a tough job market out there, and we are really trying to find talent from all different parts of the world to fill up our pipeline. How are you building your network of diverse candidates, and how do you really tell the story around Caylent?
Yeah, thank you so much. It's a great question. I feel incredibly grateful that today Caylent employs people in 11 different countries across 9 different time zones. That is such a unique value add, in my opinion, because we have not just our network that exists within the continental United States, we have this expanded network. We are extremely focused on leveraging all of the diversity within our organization to reach all people from all walks of life. We have a really aggressive referral program. We want people to feel like bringing people in that have diversity of background, gender, age, experience is a true value add. And we talk about it. We do a monthly town hall where we basically have an open forum. And one of the things that we take time every single month to do is talk about our recruitment efforts and how important that is to our organization. We are in a people business, and without diverse thought, we will not be successful. So from my perspective, our people are our greatest ally and asset, and we want to make sure that we are connecting, communicating, and hearing them to make sure that we continue to get better and better. Additionally, we're actually looking at working with an outside partner called In Her Sight that is really building an incredibly powerful platform that gives companies an opportunity to connect with all types of diverse candidates in all different types of roles, whether it be engineering or sales, marketing. And to me, we have to be willing to ask for help and to say what we do know, and definitely be open to understanding what we don't know. And that is key for us on our journey to make sure that we are filling our pipeline with incredibly diverse candidates.
Andy, what about you? How is Accenture building their pipeline of diverse candidates?
It's a really good question. I mean, as you said, we are in a massive, hyper intensive talent war out there, and you have that sort of war on the one hand, and it's done in the backdrop of sort of a very relatively small, diverse pool of talent, and so it's highly intensified. We put focus on our purpose, our ambition, our commitment to meeting our targets, and this sort of culture of equality and open transparency. We put heavy focus on that, and we measure ourselves, we report on that, and we firmly believe that by having that sort of intentional focus and just putting it in our everyday life, in what we do, you retain your talent, you progress your talent, and people learn about that, and they see it, and as a result of that, you get a little bit of a net influx of talent. But it's important that certainly for us, we focus really hard and making sure that we're looking after who's in the company, whilst at the same time being very intentional in attracting the talent from outside. As we touched on earlier, from all forms of the diversity canvas, and it just again takes a lot of work. But if you're intentional about it and you make it as part of your everyday job, and you show people that they are valued, and that there is a sort of multiplier with having them in, we find that that helps. In fact, we recently found that once you sort of establish this culture of equality, there's a sort of innovation mindset that is released, and because people feel safe and comfortable, they become even more innovative, and that sort of, I believe it was a multiple of 6, so people become 6 times more innovative in the company. And so if you can celebrate that, show it, reward it, you start being attractive to the talent outside, and so that's a lot of our focus.
So Val, I'm going to ask you, and I'll ask Andy and Lauren the same question. Lots of great content today. We know that we're making progress, but we also know that it's not fast enough. So if our audience takes nothing else away from this panel, what's one thing that you want to leave them with, Val? And then Andy, I'll turn it to you as well.
I still come back to just the power of empathy and the importance of leading from that place. And Andy mentioned this earlier, but just the need to create psychological safety and to be willing to express vulnerability. Both are extremely important in these efforts to create inclusive, diverse, and equitable environments. I also think that starts with just a deep level of self-awareness and humility and willing to listen and to admit when, I've made a mistake, when I've used language that made someone feel isolated or not part of our community, and getting better. And for me, I'm constantly on the path of self-discovery and getting better. And I think the more that you can hold up a mirror and show people what it means to have true empathy, whether it's an experience that you understand or one that you don't, just holding that space is incredibly important. And I think if everybody showed up with that level of willingness and understanding and empathy, I do believe progress would increase in velocity. I think often where we hit, that broken rung or we are met with resistance, there's a lack of empathy, there's a lack of understanding, there's a lack of active listening, and just that baseline human to human vulnerability. So if anybody, walks away with one thing, I think be open to show up with more of that in a work environment.
Andy, what about you? What's a piece of advice that you want to leave everyone with?
I'd echo what Lauren and Jen have touched on. I'd maybe also say, this is it's super important, but to make it all a reality, we have to make it a priority. And we recently found that a lot of leaders out there will say culture is a priority, and rightly so. But only, I think it was 21% of the leaders out there have made it their top priority, and only a smidge above that, I think 23%-ish, have a target related to culture. And so there's this sort of view right now that is emerging, which is this sort of culture perception gap, what the leaders are saying and thinking is happening on the ground, and what boys and girls on the ground and are saying is actually happening, and so that perception gap for us is super important, and I'd encourage everybody to know that it's there and to work really hard to close that gap. You've got to put the work in to close that gap, and we find that if you close that gap, it actually serves as a multiplier for your company's performance. So, this thing is a priority, but you've got to work to make it real, and that's maybe what I'd leave you with, Rachel.
Okay, Lauren, one last question for you. Aside from who you're going on vacation with, if our audience takes away nothing else from this panel, what's one thing or one piece of advice you want to leave them with?
I'd say diversity is not just gender. I think we have made such strides in looking at how we get more women in tech, how we get more women in the boardroom. But it's way beyond that. It's more about taking a second to step in somebody else's shoes. It's about really understanding what somebody needs on a personal level and recognizing that just because that's different from what you need and what you want in your career or just in life in general, that doesn't mean that they shouldn't get the support to fulfill their wants and needs. So I think taking a look and realizing that diversity is about individual needs, wants, desires, goals, and futures, as opposed to kind of segmenting it by group that is diversified by race, gender, identity, location, language, everything. So I think just taking that opportunity to realize that everyone's wants and for the future might be different than yours, but to advocate for that. So thank you again, Rachel. I think great panel and great opportunity to really continue on our diversity journey and find ways, learning from my fellow panelists here about how we all individually can be better about diversity and inclusion.
Perfect. So there certainly has been a lot of progress that's been made since the early 90s, but we all know, just based on what I've heard from you all today, that real barriers remain. And getting to where all four of us are in our careers have taken many sacrifices. And I believe our careers have had a lot of twists and turns. And frankly, it's not super picture perfect. And I think for this audience, what I want them to take away is it's not easy. You've heard from Andy, you've heard from Lauren, you've heard from Val, and they've all told you about some amazing things that they're doing inside of their company. And they've also shared, the supportive ecosystem that they've built. The truth is, we've got way more work to do to get to the future that we all deserve. And it's going to take every single one of us to get there. In fact, the stakes are getting higher as we move into the next generation of computing. So what I want to leave all of you with is, it is our job to make sure that inclusion, diversity, and equity aren't just talking points, but we take action behind them. It's also our job to ensure that equity and diversity and inclusivity starts at home. So our sons, our daughters, our nieces, and our nephews grow into a workforce that's different from today. So in closing, every single one of us owns creating the future that we want, and we're going to have to start now with all of us. Success is a team sport, and we're going to start having to have those hard conversations and measure our impact and continue to learn and really go create that future that we all need. So thank you all for joining us. We appreciate you. We appreciate the journey that we're all on. And I can't wait to have this session next year and have these leaders share some of the amazing progress that I know they will make in 2022. Thank you so much.